Microsoft has elaborated on their Windows 11 CPU requirements and defended the TPM requirements as well. So after the reveal, like, Luke, were you a little surprised to find out that 8th gen Core and 2nd gen Ryzen were listed as the minimum supported CPUs?
Very, extremely, I would actually say.
Yeah, and this isn't one of those things where it's kind of like, you know, oh, I definitely have not seen those pictures before. Like, this is honest surprise, right?
Yes.
All right, because now
especially because
my world is shattered. My world is shaken, Luke. I don't know what I can trust and what I can't, because, you know, I thought you were a truthful kind of character, and now I found out you've seen all these pictures already. Yeah.
There's also stuff like, was it I think Vista, where they had this like pretty high system requirement, and then like no one listened to it, and then everyone hated Vista. So like, but it worked on those systems, even though it was just a bad experience. Like,
yes.
it doesn't seem like that's necessarily the case. Like, it actually might require these.
So we'll get into this. Now, the crazy thing about it though is that some older CPUs, because you got to remember there's two different important dates for a CPU. There's the date that it actually was initially available commercially. That's date number 1. And then date number 2 is the date that it went EOL, that it effectively stopped being sold. And here's the problem. Some of those CPUs that are older CPUs were still being sold brand new less than 2 years ago, like the Ryzen 5 1600AF. Now, Microsoft has since announced that they are testing Zen 1 and Kaby Lake CPUs via the Insider program. However, installing the Insider Windows 11 build with an unsupported CPU will show a message that says the final version may not be available for you upon release, which is a pretty big downer. With that said, our internal testing has Windows 11 running on much older CPUs, so there's probably more to the story here than compatibility or performance. We actually got it running on a Core 2 Duo, and we just shot a video on how we did that, and it seemed to run completely fine. Like, Core 2 Duo, what's that, 2007? 2008? Core 2 Duo release date. Like, what's the E? When did the E? 2006. 2006. That was... Oh, wow, I'm old. It was 15 years ago.
15 years.
Holy shnikes. Anyway, the other big requirement that has caused issues for people is the TPM, or Trusted Platform Module. Microsoft's PC Health Check app proclaimed that many modern PCs were incompatible due to a lack of TPM. The frustrating thing about that is that its only recommendation to rectify the problem was to buy a new PC. The PC Health Check app has since been pulled, and that's a good thing, because the last thing you want to do after a period of prolonged hardship around the world is say, hey, you know what? Things not working out for you so great. PC's a little old. You know what? Go buy a new one.
But you don't buy a new one.
You don't just have a bunch of money to just go buy a new one. Why don't you have money to buy a new one, you slob? Like, that's the way a lot of people felt about it, and that's justifiable, because if you have a perfectly good computer, why should you suddenly just have to throw it away and buy a new one because you don't have some little validation module thing? And of course, just because your computer might have the option to add a TPM doesn't necessarily mean that it will be easy to do it. Scalpers immediately bought out stock of TPMs and put them up on sites like eBay for many, many times the price. The good news is that most platforms since 2015 have a TPM integrated into the firmware. It's just disabled by default on DIY motherboards. So all of this confusion has led manufacturers like MSI and Gigabyte to make press releases with supported lists of motherboards that can use TPM 2.0. Although, here's a problem. Many ITX boards actually don't have the pins for the module, which is a little frustrating because, especially with high performance ones, they're always looking for new ways to save space. However, most non-ITX boards since 2013 have TPM headers, and ever since Skylake and 1st Gen Ryzen, virtually all have firmware TPMs. With that said, not all discrete TPM headers are the same. ASUS and Gigabyte each have 3 different types of them, all of which are incompatible with each other. So you can't just go on eBay, order a TPM module, and plonk it onto your system. You have to make sure that it is compatible not just with your motherboard vendor, but also with the specific model of motherboard you have. Now, Luke, how do you feel about the requirement of a TPM?
It feels a little weird to me, personally, not gonna lie.
I mean, we can talk about what it's for. I mean, one of the things that TPM is great for is something like BitLocker full drive encryption. Because the TPM it's a pretty simple device, actually. It's a little cryptographic device that will generate, it's kind of like it's got a random number generator built into it. And then it stores the private key for the encryption so that it can't be stolen effectively. It's a little kind of, you could think of it as kind of like Apple's T2 chip, but way less sophisticated. So it facilitates hardware level encryption effectively.
It feels like to me that this should have been a like warning campaign type of thing, where like Microsoft tries to because these things they theoretically do help. So I feel like Microsoft should have been like, hey, while you're installing Windows 11, we highly freaking suggest that you like turn this thing on or that you do this other thing. Mm-hmm. Or maybe they even block you and say your computer is not ready, and then they do that thing where there's like the text-based link in the corner that's like, I don't care, and then you can bypass it. Something like that allows people to acknowledge that Microsoft thinks they should have this thing, but they can just install it anyways. Well, it feels weird that it's a requirement.
For OEMs, it's been a requirement for a long time now. Like, I think a TPM, some kind of TPM implementation has been required for at least 4 or 5 years now. So sure. It's been available to consumers since, when was BitLocker added? Was that with Vista or 7?
But I mean, we've talked about this on WAN Show before. There's Skylake Systems. Skylake, am I referencing the right thing? Hold on one sec.
BitLocker 2007. Yeah, what's that?
Yeah, there's Skylake Systems that people are still using and still like gaming on and having a good old dandy time, and they probably don't have the hardware for this, even if that's like a pre-built from an OEM.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true.
And they might want to run Windows 11, and they, in my opinion, should just be able to bypass it. And again, maybe they could do that like advanced user thing where the like way to bypass it is like hidden in some corner that you're probably not going to look at unless you know to look there or whatever. But I think I personally believe there should be some way to be like, yeah, whatever, dude, my computer's from 2014 or something. I understand, or beyond. Like, I understand there might be some security problems with the fact that my system's super ancient, but I don't care.